And this is leading lab classes, and this is a panel of experts, people that teach in different departments and colleges across campus that work with graduate teaching assistants to help them orientate them and work with them to lead lab classes. So we're going to give you as many tips as we can, and we're going to go one at a time, introduce ourselves, and then kind of round robin, give our tips, and then we'll open it up and allow you to ask us questions, and we'll kind of just whoever feels like they have a good answer will answer those questions. So hopefully by the end of the session, you'll have a lot more information about leading lab classes. So I'll start with an introduction and one tip. My name is Dr. Alexa Chilcutt. Like I said, I'm the director of the public speaking program in the College of Communication and Information Sciences, and I manage 10 graduate teaching assistants that teach performance labs. So my first tip would be to think about how many of you, raise your hand, actually took a class in undergrad where you had a lab instructor that was a TA? Okay. And they were perfect, right? They're perfect, you loved them. Can you think, everybody really do this, can you think of something that you didn't like, a quality that you did not like in those TAs? Somebody tell me one. Lack of information? Okay. Somebody tell me another one. No personality. Good.
Oh, I didn't know that was a requirement.
Somebody else? Not available. They were not available. Okay. No sympathy.
Ooh, good one.
Anyone else? What did you hate about your TA?
Wore headphones while teaching.
Wore headphones. All right. Good times. Okay, so they didn't seem confident in the material. Just like teaching public speaking, I always start by asking people, what do you most dislike about having to be an audience member and listen to someone else speak? So a lot of times, instead of being constantly barraged with the what to do's, it's great to start with, what do you not want to do? And think about those qualities that you didn't appreciate as an undergraduate, and think about how you can not be that way. So that's my first tip. All right, pass it on.
I think one of the best tips, let me tell you who I am. How about that? I'm Lisa McKinney. I am in the School of Accountancy. I was an accountant for 10 years, and I've been teaching accounting for 10 years after that. I got both my degrees at Alabama, so I was taught by TAs at Alabama. So I remember it. I had a TA for public speaking 20 years ago who was really good. So I can kind of remember how that felt. But my tip would be, I coordinate all the accounting labs, but my tip would be take the class with a grain of salt. What I mean by that is you are going to have some students that are rude, insulting, and hurt your feelings. And use it as a lesson. I think 95% of the people, I make all statistics up. All statistics are made up. Learn that if you learn nothing today. 95.7% of students will be decent people. You will have people that are stressed out, and they will take their stress out on you. And I think that's the hardest part of being a TA. I really do, because being an instructor, that was the hardest thing. At first, I was very sensitive, and yes, you should have sympathy, but at the same time, I don't know a TA that hasn't at one time been berated if you teach for an entire year. So I don't know if I want to say get a tough skin, but take criticism that is constructive and do something with it, but you are going to get unconstructive, simply mean-spirited criticism. In fact, after I had a baby, online, someone decided to say on that Rate Your Professor that I was just not losing the weight fast enough. And I did not feel that was relevant to my teaching, but it hurt my feelings, you see? I mean, I was just like, if I ever find out who you are. It was a low blow, and I think most of you at some point might get a low blow. They're going to attack something. Maybe you'll escape and you won't, but I think every instructor at some point has somebody just been really nasty. And so be ready for that. Share with your friends when it happens. Try to use it as a growing tool, Because when you're in business, you're going to have clients, or whatever aspect of life you go into, you're going to have people that treat you like that at some point, and it's going to be, how do you deal with it?
Normally I stand up, but then I was told I might not should do that. But I'm Jane Marasco, and I teach in the Department of Biological Sciences. And for about 10 years, I was the laboratory coordinator, so I coordinated all the GTAs for the entry-level biology classes. I've seen just about everything that you could think of. And more, maybe, I don't know. So, students, it is really weird because they're going to come up, just to play off of what you've been saying, is they'll come up with any excuse, all excuses, and I think I've heard them all, especially since I have boys of my own. So if I hadn't heard them from them, I've heard them from other students. So, you know, sort of like, okay. I always act like I'll believe everybody. Because I don't want to tell somebody, no, that's not true. Yeah, I don't want to, like, start a confrontation there. So I say, okay. And usually what I found out, you can be really tough and you can require all the documentation and everything that you want to say you've been out or you've been sick or this has happened or that's happened. We in the biology department have somebody that actually checks that out. So I think it's always good for you to let your students know what the policy is. Hey, if you're going to be sick and you need an excuse, you can bring your excuse, but make sure that it is a valid excuse, because we're going to have somebody that calls. Had a student one time who had their father, who was a doctor, write excuses. I mean, at first it was, I don't know if both parents were a doctor, I'm not quite sure, but I kept getting excuses from parents. And you know, that may be true, but they lived, I don't know how many states away, so I'm not quite sure that was a valid excuse. But, no, that is not really a tip, but one of my tips I think that will help you when you're teaching, especially when you first start teaching, is that when you first go into the lab, okay, make sure that you're tough with what you require. So if you are requiring that you don't have cell phones, that you don't see their cell phones, that you tell them at the very beginning, no cell phones, put them in your book bag. Whatever the requirements are for that lab, if the book bags have to go in the corner, if the cell phones have to be in the book bag, if they have to clean up, ooh, good one, clean up the lab before they leave. You don't want to do their job, do you? Do you want to clean up their stuff? No, you don't want to. So tell them. Say, okay, this is the rules of the lab. And what I found is that if you go in at the very beginning and you're professional, but you're just stating the rules. These are the rules of this lab. If you start to leave and it's not cleaned up, I will tap you on the shoulder and say, come on, let's clean it up. Most students, let me use a percentage, 97%. No, most students will do what you ask them to do. If you tell them at the beginning, this is the rule, this is what you expect, they'll follow that rule. Most of them will. It's really hard to be nice at the beginning because you want to be everybody's friend and you want them to like you. It's really hard to start off nice and then try to be tough. You can't go back. If you're a nice person and you try to get them to clean up, they just think you're kidding. No, they're too nice. They're not going to make me do that. So when you first get in there, whatever your rules are, make sure that, you know, you're not mean, but make sure you're sort of stern and you just state those rules and tell them what they're expected to do in that lab.
Okay, my name is Silverstone. I'm an instructor in physics and astronomy, actually. So I not only work with somewhere between 4 and 6 introductory physics lab instructors, but also coordinate all of the astronomy lab instructors for the introductory astronomy classes. So I have some interesting perspectives on what that brings to bear here. In order to try to help you remember some of this information, I'm going to actually build a model, something maybe a little bit silly, but I like to talk about your role as a delicious 3-layer layer cake. All right? Top layer is your interaction with the university and with the professors that you interact with for the classes if your lab is linked to a lecture class. So I would put in that professionalism. And let me also comment while I'm there a little bit about professionalism. We've already hit on it a couple times, but the idea of a TA wearing headphones or maybe playing with a cell phone during the lab. I think one of the most important things for professionalism is put your own cell phone away. I actually had some TAs while I was giving a lecture in a combined lecture lab class. The TAs were playing with the cell phones and not listening to me. And I really think that in order for you to set the stage for professionalism, to make sure your students really look to you as an authority on any level, even if you're very nice, you still need to be a little bit of an authority. Be as professional as you can be. Wear something like what I'm wearing today, a shirt with a collar and pants. Not required for every lab, but I think that really helps set the stage that then students can look to you for questions, for whatever's going on in the class or in that lab room, and you don't have to fight that battle if you're already looking the role to some degree. Now again, not required for all of you, but I would highly encourage that. Let me just briefly touch on the other layers of a layer cake, and then we'll probably get into that in the next round. But the middle layer, actually let's go down to the bottom layer. That's the students, right? They're in your lab to learn something. The middle layer is the pedagogy, the actual techniques and the work you're doing in that lab room to help the students learn. So I have things that I can say about all these layers, and then hopefully at the end I'll stick my fork in and mix them up a little bit. But hopefully that'll stick in your mind for some of this great information. Enjoy the delicious layer cake.
Okay. To go off of what Murray said, professionalism is one of my tips as well. And for the graduate teaching assistants that I have in the public speaking program, I actually encourage them and mandate that they wear professional attire. And that means for the men, it's slacks and a belt and a collared shirt. But my guys typically take it up a notch or two and they wear full suits, you know, a tie, button-down shirt, at least at the beginning of the semester. Kind of with Jane, you always start out strong. You want to be approachable, but you have to be professional. And I don't know how many of you are coming out of undergraduate and going straight into graduate school? Raise your hands. Okay. This is the thing. When I was a TA in, getting my PhD, I was a return to school kind of person, so I was older. It wasn't as much of an issue. With you coming out of undergraduate into a graduate program, the students that you're going to be teaching in those labs you're only a year or two older than they are. So you have to, and don't ever tell them how old you are. Do not ever tell them how old you are. If they ask, be evasive. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. But look the part, because the bottom line is a first impression. If you make a good first impression, you have gained a lot toward professionalism and gaining their trust and looking like a credible individual. If you make a bad first impression, then you're going to have a lot of work to overcome that. So, and 80% of a first impression is by sight alone. I didn't make up that statistic. 80% of a first impression is by sight alone. So the minute they see you and that very first lab, they are automatically going to make a first impression of you, how credible you are, how professional, how strict you're going to be. You remember how walking into a class, if your lab instructor had on shorts and flip-flop shorts and the flip-flops, you thought, this is going to be a breeze. But if you walked into a class and your professor had on, full garb, you thought, okay, this is going to be, toe the line. So make sure that you do approach things professionally, and appearance is a big part of that. So, and I would say keep up that appearance as much as possible. And then I'll talk later on about, just what does that professionalism mean in being approachable. You have to balance that. But on the professionalism thing, let me give this tip out. Do not friend anyone in your lab. That's a good tip.
The students are going to Google you as soon as they find you in that lab the first day. They're going to Google you. They're going to find you on LinkedIn. They're going to find you on Facebook, wherever the heck else you are, and they are going to send you a request. So the best thing to do is the first day of lab say, people,
we're going to have a wonderful time in this lab, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot, and I'm approachable, and you can come and ask me anything, and I'll try and be, facilitate what you need. But if you send me a friend request, it's not because I don't like you. I am not allowed to do that. And just blame it on somebody else. And that's what I tell my TAs. Blame it on me. I don't care. I will always be the bad guy, and I will always back you up. So just say, I'm not allowed to do that. And then later on, after they're out of your class, if you want to friend them, you can do that. But good tip.
That's great. All right. Wow, that was amazing. I don't know what to say after that. We're done. Let's go. The other tip I'd like to give is know your role and your place, which sounds kind of snotty, know your place. What I mean by that is know what is expected and what you're supposed to do and what you're not. For example, in my class, I have a 42-page syllabus. I exaggerate a little bit, but we have 1,200 students, and so over the last 10 years, I have just keep adding things because the more rules and procedures and everything worked out, the better is what I've found. So my TAs are told to read those rules, know the rules, and follow those rules. So what I mean by know your place is do not feel pressured ever to bend the rules. It's only going to cause you stress. If the rule is that rule, there it is. So I kind of felt this in the beginning, even as an instructor 10 years ago. I was like, oh, you poor thing, and the rule was this, and I felt sympathetic to some extent, but chaos erupts once it's insane, isn't it? When you deviate from the rules, everything goes to hell in a handbasket. So what I mean by know your place is that. Also, on the flip side, I want to say you are not responsible for everything. So that's the good news, right? The buck doesn't really stop with you. You're an enforcer, and you're the one that keeps the rules. But at the same time, if terrible things are happening where parents are trying to get involved or something is kind of blowing up, go to the person that is in charge. For my accounting labs, it's me. And so the buck stops here. You have responsibilities and what you have to do, but you're not in charge of everything. It's kind of nice, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so don't forget that. You don't have to do everything, and it's not your problem. Just try to know what you're supposed to do, know your place, know your limits, and then the other huge, terrible stuff is not your problem.
Okay. Next tip. Okay. And we're sort of just flowing on. One of the things that you need to know is your syllabus. And this is probably going to go back to what we've been saying, but it seems sort of simple, and you think, well, I'm not writing my syllabus, okay? But you need to know what's in that syllabus because there are your rules, and there are what you're supposed to do in case of an emergency, in case there are discrepancies. It has things that the student's supposed to know. It's up to you to go over that syllabus on the first day of class. Don't assume that they have gone over the syllabus, and don't just say, hey, read the syllabus, guys. You think they're going to do that? No, they don't do that because of all the emails I get at 2 o'clock in the morning when they are, all of a sudden a thought appears. I wonder if we have class today. Oh, let's just email her. No, it's on the syllabus. We don't have class. Oh, okay, if I had read the syllabus. So I don't usually answer those emails because I figure that is not, waste of my time when it's on the syllabus. But tell them, look at your syllabus. Also, a lot of the UA policies are on that syllabus, and so it's always good, even if they've had some knowledge of those policies, it's always good for you to go over some of those areas, and you'll be having that tomorrow extensively. So, no, today extensively, and then I think tomorrow we're going to cover it in some of our breakout sessions. So, but know the UA policies, and know to always say, I need to talk to my supervisor about that. Don't ever give a flat answer if you're not quite sure. Just say, I've got to talk to my supervisor and I will get back to you, and always get back to them, because that can be irritating too when a student asks for something you promise and then you don't ever get back to them and they don't know what's going on. But one of the things, know your syllabus, know those potential questions, because they're always going to come up, same types of questions, and don't believe them if they say, if you do this, I'll never tell anybody. Do you think they wouldn't walk out and tweet as soon as they're out of the building? Oh my gosh, I thought that was done with, and I had somebody ask me that last semester. If I just need that half a point, I won't tell anybody. I said, yeah, sure, okay. Yeah, I believe that. And that's pretty much how I say it. Yeah, I believe that, because, and then I tell them it's the rules. It is the rules. I cannot give any points. It is not fair for me to give any points. I can't give points unless you give points. So it's not fair, right? How many of you are going to be teaching something that's a multiple lab? Anybody teaching biology? Okay, those are multiple labs, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what happens in one lab, it has to happen in the next lab, because I guarantee one of your students will be roommates with the student in another lab. And they'll be quick to tell you, well, my roommate's lab instructor let them do this. And so those kind of things, if you are adhering to your syllabus, well, you can't help what the other TA's doing. You can mention it to your supervisor so that you want to have everybody treated the same. So that's a tip. Know your syllabus.
Sounds
There you
great.
go.
Cool. Okay, so let me get back to my layer cake, back to the bottom again. You got your students, everyone in your class who's supposed to be there to learn something. One of the most critical things you can do, especially the first lab, the first time you see your students, is set expectations. Many of them, especially if it's an introductory class, have no idea what it means to be a college student, how to figure out what they do and don't know so they know even what to ask questions about. So setting expectations is probably the biggest hurdle that you need to overcome as soon as possible at the beginning of the semester. I have the same problem in all of my lecture classes, so I know this is percolating all around. You're also closer in age and experience to your students than the faculty will be. So you can act as a much better liaison in both directions. Going up to that top layer, you can tell the faculty member what's going on in your lab, tell your supervisor what's going on. They can help adjust things, make things work better for learning for the students. And then, of course, back down. If there's something that you know about that happened in the class that you need to communicate to the students, you're using a language that's likely better to be received, better for them to understand than what the faculty member is using. So again, it's the sort of role that you can play. If you know your role, you can actually use that to your advantage and really increase student learning. And let me talk a little bit about that middle layer, about the pedagogy. One of the neat natural things about labs is that they're usually hands-on. You're getting the students to wrestle with difficult topics. This is actually what education research, and particularly in physics and astronomy, has taught us about lecture courses. Just talking to students and telling them information is not an effective way for students to learn. Now, actually, I should really qualify that approximately 60%. I'll use a percentage, but it is kind of rough and depends a lot class to class. But about 60% of the class are really not absorbing what they need to absorb from lecture alone or from what reading was assigned. So what they really need to do with the material is work with their hands, to wrestle with ideas, to talk about it and put it in their own words. That's where you have this amazing role in a lab. Labs are naturally structured to get students to do this. So you are going to be exercising what's actually the most important role that would happen in a lecture classroom if we can get these sorts of techniques incorporated into lecture classrooms, which a lot of us are trying to do. So you get to experiment with that. When you go on to your next step in your careers, if you're going on as a tenure track faculty member, for instance, this experience you're having as a graduate TA might be your only teaching experience before you start competing for those jobs. So this is a chance for you to experiment with some of these techniques and experiment with what it means to teach students. Definitely talk to your supervisor, talk to the faculty, make sure you know what the limits are with what you can do, and then play with them, work with them, especially after you do your first lab. If you come back and teach again, you can make changes. You can try to see what works and what doesn't work. I want you to encourage you to think about that and think about what you're doing in the lab room and think about what you can change, and all for the benefit of the students. Do what you can.
Okay. All right. I always enjoy doing this because we do kind of build off of one another. And, you know, on the professional front, that really runs into being prepared. And I think we're all hitting being prepared and understanding what's expected, expectations of the students. And to Jane's point about the syllabus, one of my TAs, and I've asked them to write a list of to-dos and not to-dos that they learned over last year for my new group that's coming in. And she put down, print out everything. Print out the syllabus, print out the schedule. And she put it in a little 3-ring binder, and she took it to lab with her every time, because she said inevitably it was always a student asking about, what's the point scale on this? What does the syllabus say? And about attendance. And so she always just referred back instead of trying to look like the authoritative person. She could say, okay, this is what the syllabus says. Read right here. See this? So being prepared in that aspect. Have the materials with you, know the material. But the other thing is, be prepared when you go to lab. If it's biology, and I don't know anything about that, but it would be great, I'm sure, and Jane will probably talk about this, as will Murray, if you're familiar with the equipment, you've kind of run the experiment, you don't look like a, ill-equipped TA. Same thing in a performance lab. They can, kind of like dogs, right? They can sniff out people that are nervous or whatever else. Undergrads, you remember this. You were there at some point. Undergrads, you know if somebody's not prepared, and you do not respect that. You do not respect that in a TA. If you think that they're just trying to willy-nilly figure out what to do for 50 minutes in the class, or the equipment's not working, which will always happen. The equipment will fail you at some point, no matter what kind of equipment it is. But you just need to be prepared. Go in there and don't look like you're frantically trying to figure out what's going on in that 50 minutes. And my people have multiple labs as well. They teach 2 apiece in the fall and 3 apiece in the spring. And, you need to be know what you're going to do that week before you get there, know what you're going to do that day, because, yes, you need to be consistent. But the other thing is, I would say, talk to the other people that are leading labs as well, and use them as a resource for ideas, what worked, what didn't work. Because the other thing is, not only do they compare what did you do in the last lab because they've got a roommate, but they will start comparing you to the other people teaching the same lab. Well, in that lab, they did blah, blah, blah. Well, so just be prepared so that you look as credible as possible and so that things run as smoothly as possible. Are we open for Q&A? No, I think do we have one more?
We're doing 3 tips?
Yeah. Oh, you got
Okay.
another one? Go ahead. Sure, absolutely.
Another tip I would say, I will compare this to a martini. No, I'm just kidding. The olive is the student. No, I have, since I did not come with such a glorious example, I guess I would say we've been all doom and gloom a little bit here. Teaching is fun. And so I guess my last tip would be, bring in your personality into the lab to some extent. If you are a person that has a sense of humor, as most of you probably do, then that is okay to use that and to show you chose this as your graduate field for a reason. You love biology. I don't know why. I'm yet to use my meiosis and mitosis, but I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I love accounting, which you can't possibly fathom, right?
Okay, exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, you are in this field of graduate study because for some reason that's your thing and you dig it, right? Show them that you dig it and show them why you dig it. It's okay to show. And maybe you're a quieter person that's a little more reserved. You, in your own way, can show them. For example, if you're doing stuff that day, it is okay to say, I was reading in the newspaper about a cool new scientific discovery. I was reading in the newspaper about an accounting fraud. Can you believe they did that? Those kind of things bring life to the class and personality. You enjoy it, show them, and they will enjoy it.
Oh, another tip. Okay, another tip. Okay, just building on. The worst thing that I think that you could do is to not do the lab before you actually teach the lab. Now in biology, there'll be prep meetings, but not depending on whether you're an experienced person or not. You may be told about the lab, and it just sort of depends whether or not you actually do the lab. Go and do the lab. Go there before classes start. Make sure, because supposedly all the instruments are turned on. Supposedly you have every single thing in there that you need. It is disconcerting as heck when you're saying, okay, and let me show you. It's not, excuse me a minute, and then you leave to go get whatever it is that you don't have. And in the biology building, it means going down 3 hallways, and so it's like, oh my gosh, by the time you get back, it's 10 minutes later, and they're packing up to leave because they think you've gone. So, make sure before, I hated if I would walk in, I would look at everything, making sure I had everything was there, all my materials were there. When you teach it after a while, when you're experienced, you can make up some of those awkward times. You can sort of go on to something else. You can alter a little bit of the way you were going to do things, and not be going away for about 15 minutes trying to find everything. So you would save yourself that awkwardness if you just do the lab ahead of time. Even if the TA or the whoever is teaching you the lab instructor, even if they don't say that you have to, I would do it. I mean, I would sit there and do that. And another thing I would do, you may be required to do it, but you may not be, is make a little outline of what the lab is going to be. What are the most important points that you want to get across in that lab? Obviously, you're doing the lab to tie in some concepts of some sort. And you're practicing, or whatever you're doing is going to tie in some concept. Make sure you know what those concepts are and how what you're doing is tying into it. I think the worst thing that students feel is that they leave a lab and they say, well, it was sort of like a little cookbook. I added this, and voila. But I'm not sure why I did that. I just did it because somebody told me to do it. Nothing worse than that. There should be an objective. Why you're doing it. And you should be going around and asking students. That's the big thing when you're a TA. Isn't it great you get to meet people? And it's sort of like, oh, so what do you think's supposed to happen here? Why did you mix this with this? Ooh, I hope you didn't mix this with this. No, but you didn't do that, did you? So, I'm a more flamboyant type person. More going in, trying to talk to them, trying to, I act like I'm on something, but I'm not. I know students think that, oh my God, what is she taking? But I'm sure I know that because someone have asked me before. But anyway, I'm flamboyant, but I like to interact with the students, and I like to find out what do you think is going to happen? You did this, well, and why did it happen? Did you expect that? So there's all kinds of questions that you can ask, and don't be afraid. Did you like it? Did you ever have a lab, let's ask this, where the TA sort of sat at the podium and was doing something else while you did the lab? Nobody ever had a teacher that did that? Oh God, I did. And wasn't it irritating because you didn't know whether you should ask them something. You didn't know whether you were doing it right, and you didn't know, oh my gosh, am I supposed to know all this? I don't know. I guess I'm mixing the right things together. I guess it's going to come out right. And you're like, I don't know. So don't be that kind of TA. Make sure that you walk around and get to know your students. It doesn't mean that you have to be their best buddy and meet them at a local bar. I had that asked too, if I'd meet somebody at a local bar. Okay, I know who would think. Look at my age. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, So, you don't want to put yourself in that type of position. I mean, it's flattering, like, oh, I'd love to, but I can't. I'm your teacher, people would think that I was going to give you a better grade, so you don't want to do that. But make sure you know your lab. Make sure you're prepared every single time. If that's getting a little outline, any of you get nervous when you're right in front of people? Do you think you're going to get nervous the first time you're in there? Anybody? No, okay. I'm so glad y'all raised your hand. I'm thinking I'm the only one that gets nervous. I had to write out a little bitty note card that said what I was going to say, like starting it off. And of course I forgot to tell them who I was. I went on all these rules, and then somebody raised their hand and say, could you, what's your name? I'm like, oh my gosh, that should have been on the list. Introduce myself. But I did make a little outline that didn't have that, but made a little outline that said, this is what I was going to do first, this is what I was going to do next. So I didn't forget anything really important. And I'm big on, well, I know in some things you can't, but in biology, sort of, you can pick up something and illustrate, and point to it and take it around, and so that people feel comfortable. Can I say one more little thing? I know, because I'm a lot fast. Okay, I'm going to be real fast. Okay, this is supposed to be in a lab where they work in groups and collaborate, but you'll see that in a group of 4, one person will do all the work, and the other ones will just sort of sit there and just, da-da-da-da. They're talking about the latest show on TV or
Football game.
whatever. Well, yeah, football game. What are they going to do at the next party? But anyway, anything but what they're, and this one person is, is being very studious and doing everything because they want a good grade, right? And so everybody else is going to get that person's good grade. Is that fair? No. So I usually go around and if somebody aren't doing their jobs, I will assign them a job. I thought, oh, I see you have time. Oh, will you be the scribe? That person can do this. You can write it down. This person can go get your equipment and replenish it. So, I assign them tasks if I see that they're not doing tasks on their own. And part of that is to show them that they can work in a group and get it done faster and maybe get better answers if they work collaboratively.
That's excellent. I'm glad you had that extra point there. So I can try to actually tie in a few of my last points to what Jane just said, which is I want to use my fork. I want to mix up some of these layers as I'm eating them. So the bottom 2 layers, the pedagogy and the students, I think actually running through your lab, very important, but see what can go wrong. In the physics labs, it's the physics GTAs, actually astronomy as well, are responsible for fixing anything or finding a replacement if something goes wrong. Try to figure out what your students are going to do to make things go wrong. That's really important because you're on the spot there when you're actually teaching that lab. So I think that's really excellent preparation. The other thing, the top and the middle. The best advice I can give, at least related to how I learned as a TA when I taught astronomy or was a TA for astronomy, I went to the lectures and I took notes just like the students were doing there. That actually wrote exactly what I needed to talk about, and it was recitation sections, but in those recitation sections I could see exactly what the students were having trouble with. If there's a lecture class related to your lab, go. Make it a priority, especially if you haven't actually had that class or sit in on that class or interacted with that faculty member. That will help your students enormously, and that will help your preparation, especially in tying in why the students are doing what they're doing in the lab as it ties to what they just heard about that week in the lecture. So I think that's really important information. Definitely try to use that. All right, here are your questions.
All right. Okay, so we're going to open the floor up. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm in the geology department, and we have the fun of doing field trips during our labs. I've found out any recommendations on how to keep the classroom control when not in a classroom. For example, I know last year someone had some issues with the walking path coming back, like through a pizza party, and everyone was offered pizza. That's really hard to control in class. So
That one's lost on me.
Advice.
I don't know.
That's new to me, but I could tell you what I would do. That has to do with setting expectations. You tell your students what it is that their role is, why they're going on that field trip, what the deadlines are for getting things done, and then if any distractions come along the way, they know they're eating into that time that they need to actually do a good job. That kind of thing. Definitely set that. This is all unanticipated stuff, right? Things are going to happen in your lab or on your field trip that you did not expect. Try to make sure you have a framework, I guess, of those expectations, and then lean on those. Say, hey, this would be fun, but look at the time. Maybe.
Very good. Okay. Yes, sir.
Dr. Silverstone, what are the flavors of each flavor of cake?
Ooh, it's actually, that's one of the experimentation kind of things I want you to do when you're thinking about your pedagogy. There are many ways of making a cake that can be delicious. Some actually don't taste so good, right? So that's part of how you're going to figure out what your role is and what you can experiment with how you do your style of lab presentations or helping students when they run into trouble. So there are many good flavors. So definitely get to explore, but also work closely with your faculty advisors and whoever's running that, the coordinating to make sure that you're within the range of flavors that's allowed. How about that?
That was a good answer. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
For office hours, what would you suggest are the best times? Like, when would students actually come? Earlier, later, late? Like, what have you guys found works best?
Honestly, I tell my TAs that what works for you, and to be accessible. That's the other thing. You have to be accessible. So if you have some office hours that are between your own classes or right after your labs or before the labs that you're going to be teaching for the students, I think a lot of times that works out because they're coming to your building anyway. They're, so they can come a little before or after. But at least be accessible through email and respond. One of the things that I had a TA do last year, and he said this was very successful for him, was he created a completely different email address just for his classes. It was like a Gmail something. But Blackboard, if you have a shell and you can do that through Blackboard, that at least keeps everything, but you have a record that you've been communicating with the students. So make the office hours fit your schedule and around their lab times if possible, but make sure that you're accessible as well.
If you're in a situation where you're teaching, like in biology, there might be 15 lab sections, say for introductory biology, and you know that a lot of that is set by not you, but somebody else is looking at your schedule and saying, oh, I see you have this free time right here. Sometimes you can have a choice, but a lot of times you can't. You're never going to be able to find a time when every one of your students would be able to come to you, just simply because everybody's got such varied schedules. And what they do in biology is just say, it doesn't, and you may want to say it to your class, if there are multiple classes, is that if you can't come to me, all of us are teaching the exact same thing. Go to someone else. If you can't go to me for a question you need to ask, then go to a time that does fit yourself. And we have all of our labs, office hours listed throughout the building. And so everything is listed so students can look and see, oh, 2 o'clock, I'm free then. Wait a minute, it's not my TA, it's somebody else, but I can be right here at 2 o'clock and get help. So
Yeah,
that might help a little
That's a good
bit.
point. Okay, yes, ma'am.
This is not a question, but more sharing from some of my own teaching experience, is that I struggle with the whole, like, I want to be their friend, but there are rules, and it is chaos when I don't follow them. So for myself, it helped me to go, the rules are something separate from me. We all have to abide by them. And I think that helps so much to go, I don't have to be the rules, like, they're just out there. We all
Yeah.
agree on them.
That's a good point. It is to kind of have, if you didn't hear her, because she said make the rules kind of a outside of yourself thing. It's just something that everybody has to adhere to. The other thing is, on that really quickly, is do be approachable. Be approachable. Yes, we want you to be professional, and we want you to kind of create that professional distance and follow the rules and, go, the buck stops with somebody else, that kind of thing. But be approachable, because let me tell you something. The more students you deal with, we have more and more students on this campus, and things happen. Yes, you're going to get crazy excuses that they just made up. That's a given. But the other given is, more and more now, things happen. I mean, people die. people in their family, they have some traumatic thing happen to them. And so just be aware enough to also be approachable and compassionate so that they feel like they can tell you something. And if it's something bigger than you, once again, you can always refer them back to the faculty member that's the supervisor. But we all have these stories. I mean, you would be amazed at the things that actually do happen.
May I share one?
Go ahead.
Best one in 10 years. No, never been beat. 4 days ago, my puppy died, and he's still in the freezer. I cannot take my test because the puppy died 4 days ago, and he's still in the freezer.
Well, now,
Can you top that?
well,
But there are real stories.
but yeah, that could be traumatic. But I mean, there are also we have had students whose mother passed away,
that's
or
absolutely,
big things,
absolutely.
or that have been held up at gunpoint,
Oh, yeah,
or I'm talking about
yes.
or raped, or
There are
we have some major
horrific-
issues.
There
Yes.
are
And
really
so-
horrible things that happen, and I learned a long time ago to, when they give me an excuse, is sort of to take that and just say, oh my gosh, I am so sorry that happened. I'm not gonna say to them, bring me an excuse, I wanna see the,
Yeah, bring me the
whatever.
obituary.
Okay,
Sometimes you do have to do that, but-
usually, at one point in time, if they keep having the same grandmother die over and over, and that's happened, is that then you do sort of require something. But usually, by and large, people don't make a lot of these things. Just some really horrific, just not even things like brain tumors and having to go and get operations, or just, what do I do? Because some people, they want to have assurances that they can make things up, that they can, life can go
Yeah.
on, and they want to have those assurances. And I give them every assurance.
Yeah.
I figure that get well first, try to get yourself together first, and then we'll figure it out. And, then we'll work with the people who are in charge. If it's not me, I happen to be in charge of my class, but you aren't in charge, really. You have to answer to somebody. Go to that person and let them be aware. Give them a name and say, this is what this person told me. I didn't want to make any promises, but I want you to be aware of what's going to happen. Usually you will get information from the university when a student will be out extensively, or when there's something that's happened. Sometimes they're referred to counseling and things of that sort, and they let supervisors know, and they'll probably let you know. But and then that's something. Remember confidentiality. You don't want to ever share any of those, anything with anybody else. Take somebody seriously. I had somebody who was stalked, and they came to me and said, I'm being stalked. I would not let that person, she had a night lab, I would not let that person leave by herself at night. I had the police come, and we had some other people in the classes that would offer to go and take her to, walk with her to her car. I take those things very seriously. Somebody could be a drama queen, but I don't want to assume that. I don't want to read in the paper the next day that somebody was hurt. So I take those things super seriously. You have to, and then you have to report.
Right. Professional but approachable.
Yeah.
So, there's that line.